I caught my fiance messaging dirty text to his toxic ex and canceled our wedding. As revenge, I slept with the man he hated the most and sent him the spicy photos. I work at a certain large financial institution in the US, and I'm not bragging, but I'm doing pretty great for myself with a lot of potential for growth. All of this while I'm still just 32. During a conference I went to about 6 years back, I chatted with the man who was sitting beside me and we got along so well. A few months after that, we started dating and we've been dating ever since. He just turned 30 a few days ago, but naturally, with the way things ended up, there was no need to call him to send wishes or anything of the sort. It was exactly on his 29th birthday that I popped the question and he said yes right away. There's a bit of a smile on my face looking back at that because it was one of the happiest days of my life and I'm sure of his, but that's soured a lot now, aged like unrefrigerated milk. Either way, I asked him to marry me. He said yes and we were engaged. Happy days. Am I right? Now I'm not certain if I'm the only one who has experienced this before, but when you deal with men who are too scared to talk about their intimacy adventures with their friends, you as a partner might end up being the person they choose to start yapping to. I've had this happen in 2 separate relationships, of which this was one of them. I think most women don't want to continually hear stories of all the women that their boyfriend, fiance, or husband has slept with. It's the same way I don't attempt to indulge any man with the people I've slept with. Anyway, it happened a few times before I finally told him that I really don't care to hear all his stories, but before that point, I had heard a lot about his most recent ex. I think it is fair to hear about exes in any new relationship, but I don't need the intimacy details. The girl's name was Catherine and they had a pretty toxic relationship, but she was so good in bed. Of course, we had slept together at this point and I had to wonder whether I was that good in bed too, maybe less so for me. Supposedly, the bedroom situation was what kept him in such a toxic thing, which I'll admit was a red flag for me, but he was much younger and by extension naturally much stupider, so I let it slide. Anyway, that's necessary background to what I have to say next. I heard a lot about Catherine in the early stages of the relationship, but after a point, nothing else. At that point, I assumed he had finally gotten over her, and that was good enough for me. I stopped hearing about her about 2 years in, even sparingly. So let's fast forward to the post-engagement stage. My fiancé, Stephen, and I were already getting into the planning phase of things. We're both from relatively well-to-do homes. I personally wouldn't say my upbringing was wealthy or rich, but I've been told I'm out of touch before and I accept my perspective. Might be a bit untrustworthy. Either way, both parents wanted something relatively big. I was fine with the friends and family type of situation. No uncles or aunts I hadn't seen since I was a toddler. But everyone, including Stephen, wanted it to be spectacular, so I gave up and let them have their way. Now here's where things get fun. Admittedly, this is where things went to hell for me back then, but as I said, I'm trying to be relatively lighthearted with the situation now. We were searching for a venue and everyone wanted something in some kind of scenic location like a private beach, a 10,000-year-old church, city hall, and on and on. Fortunately for me, I made it clear that I was fine just finding an event space in the city, but I was told I didn't have vision. So I told them they could do all the groundwork regarding the location. I wouldn't be stressing myself over something I wasn't that concerned over. So regarding a venue, Stephen told me that he was going to check out 3 of them with a friend and I was totally fine with this. I mean, what was there to object to? He's been with a friend to try out caterers and to look at dresses, so big whoop. So the day goes by and he tells me that he checked out a few places with this friend and that a certain old church was tickling he fancy quite nicely. He said he was going to check it again in a few days with the same friend just to make sure he still felt the same way about it, and I told him that was fine because, once again, I didn't care about the venue. And there was nothing that I could see to make any aspect of the situation seem off. Eventually, he went back to check the venue out with his friend again, and the consensus was that it'd be the place for him, so we put our name down. And we have to pay a deposit within 30 days to book the day for ourselves. I eventually did, so the venue was set. Now everything went swimmingly for the next few weeks. Wedding preparations continued along just fine with additional things being settled, but for the most part, we hadn't put down too much money. I am very fortunate to have had things happen the way they did because one day when my fiancé went to sign for a delivery, he left his phone on the kitchen island. And who do I see a notification from? Catherine, you there, babe? I was very tempted to go through his messages, but he came back within seconds holding the package he had picked up. I had no confirmation that it was the same Catherine, but if there was another Catherine calling her babe, I think that it'd somehow be worse in its own special way. It had to be his ex. Now, I was able to keep my emotions in check because I know how girls can be.